Pak took a step full of wildly powerful limbs and jumped right into the behemoth's body. This action caused the behemoth to start roaring wildly. The leopard's deep pupils suddenly formed a vertical line after a fierce fight, almost forgetting the behemoth's vitals. It then turned its head back despite the behemoth's dismay. That body that was originally lying on top of the behemoth's head unexpectedly began to quietly move backwards. The spirit beast leopard opened its sharp fangs ferociously, and the tail behind it even began to sway involuntarily. Its claws firmly grabbed hold of the giant beast, then took a bite out of the opponent's vitals, sucking in a large gulp intending to result in the opponent's life. Immediately afterwards, it inclined its head and ripped off a piece of its opponent's flesh, its white teeth instantly stained with bright red blood. The huge body of the giant beast began to tremble madly. The pain in its body made it forget all about it. Undoubtedly, it gave the leopard an opportunity to take advantage of it, only to see it jump aside with a poof. The stupid beast instantly frowned in place. It didn't wonder for long, though, as its mind suddenly became a blur, until finally it fell helplessly to the ground. The leopard then walked forward slowly, completely ignoring its fidgeting body. Lowering its head, it sniffed lightly at what was left of its scent. I stood by and observed the distant fight, but inside I was continuously impressed that Parker was really very brave. I reached up and patted myself on the chest, that too hanging over heart finally relaxing. But a blinding white light flashed through my mind, and I snapped to the snake scales I carried with me. I hastily reached out and took out the snake scales at my chest, my pretty face becoming very serious due to the tightness of it. As soon as I pulled off the pendant around my neck, the snake scales hanging from it were clutched tightly in my hand. At this point, I suddenly shouted across to Parker, and on receiving his response, anxiously ran over to him in my dainty bare feet. I didn't realize that Parker had pushed himself away from me, and the movement was so big that I was backing up, as if he didn't want me to go any further. I certainly don't care about that, and quickly took out the snake scales in my hand. This is for you to try. It's Curtis' scale. It's very sharp. The little leopard that had just headbutted itself lit up with some golden light on its body. It quickly changed into a human appearance. Parker reached out and took the snake scale, his handsome face flashing with a touch of seriousness. I can go ahead and try, but don't come over here. On the outside, I nodded my head in an unbelievably well-behaved manner, indicating that I was standing right here. Inside, I was shouting, "Are you kidding me? I'm not going." He quickly came to the behemoth's carcass, and his long, slender fingers groped around on it, like he was searching for something. Only a sound of a carcass being cut open could be heard. The huge belly of the beast was split in two, and the last vestige of its breath quietly dissipated. Parker turned his head away in displeasure. The countless drops of blood splattered below him, causing some impatience to show on his delicate little face. I sighed softly as I stood behind me and muttered in an uncontrollable whisper, "Puck, you're good. The behemoth is finally dead." His gaze was surprised as he picked up the snake scales in his hand, his little ears shaking a few times in confusion. Unexpectedly, the snake beast's scales were quite sharp. As he spoke, he reached out and casually threw away the blood-stained snake scales. I stood back in deep contemplation. My mind was engaged in a heated thought about how exactly the snake scale was going to pick up the... It was evident that Parker was still absorbed in his own thoughts, which gave me the opportunity to pick up the... I hastily raised my little feet and ran a few paces, and before he could notice it, I quietly stooped to include in my own hand. Just as I was about to call it quits, Parker suddenly turned around and looked over. I hastily hid the snake scales behind my back, a drop of cold sweat breaking out on my compact face. I heard Curtis say that the behemoth had energy crystals inside it. Parker scratched his head in some confusion, his amber eyes staring straight at me. I don't know if this head has one, so I'll go ahead and look for it. After a few moments had passed, Parker stretched out his blood-stained arm, and in his hand was a crystal. The tiny crystal suddenly began to glow, and even had traces of energy all around it. My mouth opened wide in surprise, my pair of almond eyes overflowing with curiosity. Could this be the energy crystal? Parker's magnetic voice rang out, explaining clearly for me word by word. This is a translucent crystal that can save your life when you're exhausted. There are also green crystals here that can prolong life, that are only found in herbivorous giants, but they're said to be huge and harder to kill. Once again, my heart expressed shock. I didn't realize that it was possible to replenish your energy and also extend your lifespan. Parker sniffed and nodded, his head full of concern. That's why pretty females make choices and pick strong orcs as mates. When the females want to replenish any energy, the males go out and hunt all sorts of giants. Only when they take various energy crystals Would they be able to keep their youthfulness forever? Parker stood very calmly in place, his expression even more unchanged, like he was talking about a trivial matter. I unconsciously gulped, but inside I was continuously shocked. This world is too metaphysical. As I was just about to open my mouth, there was a sudden noise above our heads. Looking up, it was a superb eagle. The large black eagle grabbed a bunch of important things, and with a few casual flips of its large wings, it soon landed beside the duo. It placed the leaves on the ground, its little paw stealthily stepping back a few steps, then gazing at me with eagle eyes. The sharp mouth spat out a human word. Is the behemoth coming up? It waved its wings again, and in a few easy strokes it flew into the air, carefully poking around in the distance. At that moment, it suddenly flew back anxiously, its mouth constantly shouting frantically that it was not good. Many giant beasts are coming up from over there. I didn't say anything about it, taking the scales in my small hands and slicing straight at the long hair. Then, after holding up a handful of dirt, the little white hands became instantly dirty. I closed my eyes tightly in preparation, and my little hands flew up to apply it to my face, instantly turning me into a clay figure. Parker came up to me and sniffed, indicating that the smell was much weaker, and that it should be able to escape the behemoth's sense of smell from a distance away. I squinted slightly and smiled. It would be so nice to be able to smell it as long as I stayed away from it. I don't know if it's because I was smiling too much, but when I turned my head, I noticed the giant eagle in the dark beside me. Its sharp little mouth once again mouthed human words onto my back. The words came out, and at once the nest shook with fear. But I climbed up for my little life. But what about Parker? Muir, can you take one more? Muir was cold but still warm-hearted, and there was extra room on his back, perfectly capable of accommodating one person in the giant beast that was still below them had unexpectedly appeared opposite them. This discovery caused all three of them to be somewhat stunned. The behemoths were taking a step forward, when Muir had long since whooshed into flight. The two who had just been discussing Parker had no hesitation in walking away dry at this point. Muir looked back down at Paw Paw, a hint of irrefutability in his tone. Come here. I can still carry one in my claws. Parker suppressed his inner panic, and his little head flew back to the thought of me on Muir's back popped into his mind. Unsure, I think he wasn't great if he asked another male for help, so he rushed above him and shouted with great determination, "You don't have to worry about me. I'll figure it out myself." Muir's blue eyes saw through it all, and his blackened body turned instantly. He then took me straight into the sky, and I rushed to hug Muir tightly, not daring to let go of my small hands. I lifted that dirty little face, a glint of worry hiding in my eyes. Parker was still down there. Parker, who I was worried about, stood alone against the beast. He then dropped the crystals into his mouth, his sharp eyes hidden by the broken hair on his forehead, waiting until the energy in his body began to operate. This was the only time he directly turned around at a rapid speed, intending to break these giant beasts into pieces. His original human appearance changed into his original form again from this moment onwards, and he rushed towards them very quickly, until they came to the edge of a precipice, and his strong limbs suddenly stood together. It was followed by a beautiful leap, directly dropping the beast behind it by a large margin. I Saturday on top of Muir and shouted in panic, my hair flying wildly all over the place to show my shock. The beast on the edge of the cliff seems to have no mind, but it walks into the abyss step by step without realizing it. Parker leapt down on all fours, unafraid to face the dense jungle below. He scurried straight into the jungle below, as if he was very relaxed and didn't move. I heaved a sigh of relief, as I guess he was in no danger. This Parker, he's so messed up, it's scary. Muir carried me higher and higher, and those broad wings seemed to know no fatigue. I was just about to get down and relax for a little while, when an inexplicable pain came from my chest. The pain was a little too much for me to bear, and a few little teardrops overflowed from my almond eyes. Muir quickly felt my slightly trembling body, and his azure pea eyes looked at me in surprise. What's wrong with you? But before I could say anything, he actually started to dive down and fly off into the forest, until he landed on a huge tree trunk, which he quickly used his claws to hold onto firmly. And I landed. The pain in my chest seemed to intensify as I slid down his wing. Muir hastily transformed into his human form, and began to constantly show concern for me. Why are you bleeding? I did not intend to hide it any longer, and pathetically covered my chest with my small hand. It was a Curtis bite, only to see Muir, who had just been calm and collected, hammering his fist into the trunk of a tree to the side. He really is an animal. I got a little nervous inside for no reason. After seeing his overly grumpy mood, never tell Parker. Muir fell silent, his sexy thin lips pursed tightly by his, but they didn't even have time to think about it, as once again the roar of a huge beast came from the distance. Muir stood up and looked around for a moment, his face becoming visibly grim. They've got your scent. We need to get out of here fast. I covered my chest with a look of conviction. Better fly up there. before I can't take it anymore and call it quits. He reached out his big, warm hand and took my small, white hand in one of his. Just after transforming into a giant eagle, the little head rushed back at her. You don't have to force yourself if you can't take it. Let's go. As they quickly skimmed through a bit of jungle, the scene on one side of them shocked the man and the beast a bit. The panther was standing on another black eagle that was flying head-on towards them. The black eagle underneath the leopard suddenly shouted a few times, and its pair of eyes became very stern. I opened my small mouth and sighed repeatedly. This world is really metaphysical. Mir, it seems to be your kind. Mir sniffed back, his small eyes blinking a few times as if it felt something. As the leopard king finally arrived, the leopard standing on the black eagle suddenly opened its bloody mouth and began to roar loudly and forcefully. The voice carried out to the depths of the entire jungle, causing countless leopards of the same clan to open their eyes wide. This voice should be the boss. So they scurried around quickly, trying to get to the support quickly, until the leopard with pepper began to roar, and the jungle was as silent as if they ruled it. The leopard that was originally standing on the black eagle suddenly began to emit a strange light around his body, and soon transformed into a humanoid form. He waved a hand at Black Hawk, his brow overflowing with impatience. One of you go out and get Parker. Several Black Hawks lined up in an orderly fashion, and on command, one swooped down in a quick dash. I looked across at the Leopard King, that natural aura of a king, causing my little head to show a great deal of puzzlement. This guy looks so much like Parker. Must be a powerful relative of Parker's. I didn't realize that as I watched him. He instantly sensed my vision. I was so startled by the sight that my skinny frame suddenly began to shiver. I forced myself to make a secret feast, then raised a good-natured smile. Hello. The proud Leopard King didn't answer me anything, just a light swing of that arm. It's good that people are fine. Go back to the city. The rest of the Black Eagles quickly followed orders, their huge wings waving out a gust of wind. Mir, unlike those other Black Hawks who obey orders, landed slowly on the ground when he reached the town of. Parker met me here, those strong arms firmly holding me up. We're at the tribe. I sat on the man's shoulder and looked around, my small face still stained with this dirt. But that didn't stop me from being surprised. But I can only think about it in my mind. The architecture here is so strange. Mir, who maintained his original form behind him, took 2 quiet steps forward on his small paws. It stopped moving at the sight of us chatting. He lowered his head a little lost, his little hat wondering what he was thinking about. A timely voice from Black Hawk on the sidelines interrupted his descent into a mood of loss. Mir followed his brigade, spreading his wings and speeding off into the air. I was the only one left gazing upwards. I touched the man's shoulder curiously, looking at Parker in confusion and disbelief. Why was he gone? Park waved his hand indifferently, as he said he'd go and divert the tide of beasts, so as not to hurt the other tribes. I sat in the man's arms, and was about to speak when the dominant Leopard King who had just walked over, Parker, take her down. The hairs on my body stood up in an exaggerated manner, after I heard that the Leopard King was Parker's father. No wonder it's so similar. Little Parker didn't know this, and the little ears on his head wiggled pleasantly. I'll take you to my room to rest. I sat on him and did not get off, my small hands firmly gripping the man's neck. After seeing Parker's room, I yelled again like someone who hadn't seen the world. It's huge. This is your home. Parker shook his head very easily, making it clear that this was not the case. This is my father's territory. I was even more puzzled by this, blinking my wide eyes at him a few times. Isn't your father's yours? Lil Parker said of course not, but followed it up with no indication of what it was about. Soon I was carried in his arms to the door of a room, and the cabin was pushed open with a creaking sound. As far as the eye could see, there was nothing but a haystack and stones. He moves gently to set me down, his amber eyes holding deep meaning. This is where I sleep. I looked around incredulously, but inside I was very shocked. This was like a prison cell. I asked out as if to reconfirm, are you sure this is your room? Parker sat happily wagging his tail, his little tiger teeth showing pleasantly. My room. Of course. A light bulb went off in my head. I know. You must have a lot of brothers. Your father left something to his favorite son. Parker's little ears wiggled in triumph and he bowed his head confidently. I am my father's favorite son. I stroked my chin in deep thought, my little mouth opening and closing with the intention of saying something, but I was hit on the head, and my head was red. Parker whispered compliments to me for being stupid. Males have to earn everything with their own strength. My father just raised me. I looked back at him curiously. Your father is actually the Leopard King. That's really impressive. How long has he been the Leopard King? He secretly clenched his fists and explained in a very serious tone, for 20 years. One day I will defeat him and become the new Leopard King. I was so proud of the confident Parker, and put my little hand on my chest to cheer him on. At that moment a woman came to the door of the room, panting and shouting for cups. She had waist-length blonde hair and was filled with an aristocratic aura. Only her eyes revealed an incomparable anxiety. I gave a small internal wow when I saw her. So young. This must be Parker's sister. Still lost in my own musings, I didn't realize that Parker was calling out to the beauty for her mother. Once again I was shocked beyond words, and my little mouth turned into a rectangle. The beauty turned out to be his mother. Touched, Parker hugged his mother and rubbed her face with all the pleasure in the world. Thank you for letting father come to Turnip's rescue. Immediately afterwards Parker was greeted with a heavy punch, and a bag sprang up on his head. His mother huffed and puffed and clutched her chest in displeasure. The eyes were but tightly closed. You've got a mate. Stop acting like a child all the time. It was then that I found a voice of my own, and quietly inquired of the beauty before me, are you Parker's mom? How about a beautiful mother covering her face and shaking it from side to side? Don't I look young? I nodded dumbfounded, placing my small hands obediently in my lap. Beauty said it was all thanks to Parker's father. In the future, Puck'll be great, and he'll definitely be able to hunt behemoths as well. She suddenly looked at me, who was a mud-man. Why is there so much mud on your face? I'm going to get you some water to clean it. I hurriedly waved my hand at the beauty, smilingly saying that it was not necessary. I got this on purpose. I raised those somewhat downcast eyes and looked pitifully at Mother Beauty. I squeezed the hem of my skirt in my small hands, a little too nervous to look at her. Do you know how to dissolve a mate? Mother Beauty's eyes widened in surprise, and the feathers on her shoulders stood up. Her expression turned ugly. I naturally know. Do you want to? I bowed my head, a little torn, and stammered. Afraid to speak, a few fragments suddenly came to mind. I hugged Curtis' torso and played very happily and freely. Those were my happiest times. Males only get one chance to mate, and if they are abandoned, they can never mate again. But then those images came back to me. Do I really have to cut myself off? Cut off all contact with Curtis? I was still torn between breaking and breaking, when my little hand was suddenly pulled by Parker. He stared at me with a serious face, a flash of hurt in his expression. He's forcing himself on you. Do you still hesitate? I lowered my head to cover the tears in the corners of my eyes, and then bit my lower lip tightly to keep from saying anything. At the thought of the image of Curtis forcing himself on me, it made my scalp tingle like a needle. I quickly and firmly shouted out, dirt dripping from my small face as I did so. I thought this through. I'm going to lift that. I suddenly realized that there was a bit too much grief and whispered that I had thought it through. I want to dissolve this partnership. The beauty's mother sighed softly at her words, as if lamenting the unpredictable look of the world. She turned and walked out of her son's room, indicating that she was going to get ready. But it's rather Spartan here, so you guys can come to my room. Parker could hardly hide his excitement and just hugged me with a big grin. Great. I'm still Turnip's only male. I was lost in manly glee, but my gaze was suddenly low. Was it really time to break with Curtis? The beautiful woman suddenly brought over a bowl of medicinal soup, and very quickly handed it to me. She stated that before dissolving a partnership, the bowl of medicine had to be drunk first. I picked up the pills with little hesitation, and simply gulped them down in one gulp. It's just that the medicine is a little too bitter, making me start coughing uncontrollably. I was just about to ask the beautiful woman across from me, and she just happened to answer my questions. This is the medicine that prevents you from having stray beast children. I covered my chest and swore I wasn't pregnant with his child. I'm not even a virgin. The beautiful woman expressed her disbelief in my bullshit. Since you have this beast tattoo, it means you've already had sex with each other. I covered my forehead with embarrassment, but I hadn't done anything with Curtis at all. But before I could finish the rest of my sentence, I thought of what Curtis had said to me earlier. A unique way of mating that is unique to the serpent clan, where you can mate without having sex, and females can't dissolve a mate. I poked darkly at the beautiful woman. Do male animal tattoos only appear if you have sex? It seems that people don't know about this type of coupling, and if they tell, that's how other males force females to do it. While I was still thinking in the dark, I felt a pain in my body. I covered my stomach with an ugly face, and let my small hands drop involuntarily. Nothing more could come to mind. Parker rushed to hold my body and gently inquired what was wrong with me. Was I unwell somewhere? He looked down and sniffed my body, and with some surprise he said it smelled like blood, only to see a patch of blood running down my thighs, where the hem of my skirt was below me. Panicked, Parker yelled for his mother, as if trying to figure out why I was bleeding. The beautiful woman said that she didn't know, and that this incident was beyond her foreknowledge. Better get a vet. I shuddered and covered my stomach, thinking could it be my period? It hadn't come for over 40 days, and now it's being stimulated by this drug. Right. I was helped to sit on top of the haystack by Parker, and looked at him with a worried expression. "Could you go and get me some cotton?" When he opened the drawer, he found only piles of animal skins. He held out an animal skin, and his long fingers tried to soften it for me. Immediately after placing the animal skin under my legs, Parker soothed me with extreme gentleness. "He thinks it's his own fault. I shouldn't have made you drink the medicine. If you lay snake eggs, I'll raise them." I skinned my head away from looking at him. How would a simple little leopard know that? None of your business. It's better this way. We were still complaining about our conversation when the beautiful woman finally sought out the vet. She reached out and pointed to my spot. "Veterinarian, look at her. She is in pain and bleeding after drinking the medicine you boiled." The vet looked at my body, indicated that I should be pregnant. "Not much bleeding, will be fine." Parker hugged me and cursed the vet angrily. "She's like this, and you call it okay. Is there anything you can do to make her feel better?" The veterinarian immediately looked me up and down a few times before revealing a look of dawning realization. "You're actually from the ape tribe." I nodded a little awkwardly that this was indeed the case. The vet snapped like a new face when he saw his kind. "You could give her some honey to ease the pain." Parker suddenly scuffed up and scrambled to his feet, explaining that he was going to get the honey now. I couldn't move because of my injuries, and with my little hand still rubbing my stomach lightly, I could only watch Parker go out as well. Parker was so worried about me that he transformed into his original form when he left the house. The vet walked to the door to say goodbye. "Since there's nothing else going on, I'll be off." I Saturday on the haystack with my head hung low, and at that moment no one knew what I was thinking of. The beautiful woman worriedly leaned over and asked me, "You're in pain like this. Why don't we talk about dissolving the relationship another time?" I forced my body to tremble from the pain. "It's okay with me. Just say it now." The beautiful woman sighed softly at her words. "As long as the female didn't have feelings for the male." This was a simple thing to do. Find a sharp blade to cut through the beast mark, and the maleness will follow the blood and the beast mark will disappear. I listened with a serious look on my face, my little hand no longer uncomfortably covering my stomach. "Is it really that simple?" The beautiful woman stated it was as simple as that. "But if you still have feelings for the male, the mark of the beast won't go away. With feelings, the mark of the beast won't go away." And what feelings would I have for Curtis? I picked up the snake scale I wore around my neck, and with a grimace I pulled it off. Then I didn't half hesitate, biting my lower lip tightly and not daring to make a sound. Little by little, my small hand approached the animal print. After all, I had already suffered so much pain. Wouldn't this scratching wound be even easier? But when I turned down a beast marked Curtis in the distance actually felt the energy. The weather was fine where he was, and the sun shone through the branches of the trees to every part of the land. A dark aura flashed in Curtis' eyes, and his red pupils turned into a vertical line. He looked around and surveyed the scene, his cool face becoming very ugly as he seemed to be poking around in my direction. He quickly got his bearings, and the half-man, half-beast slid quickly ahead of him. I touched the spot on my leg where the blood had flowed, and the animal tattoo had indeed not disappeared. I suppressed the wave of shock that went through me and thought to myself that Curtis was right. It really can't be disarmed. The beautiful woman Saturday and smiled happily at me. Then surprisingly, she complimented me again. "You are such a good female." I looked back at her with great curiosity, my large eyes showing a small amount of puzzlement. The beautiful woman stated that it was her fault and frowned tightly with an apologetic face. "I shouldn't have given you the abortion pill." I placed my small hands obediently in my lap and skimmed nervously. "Now there's a big misunderstanding." Until the setting sun shone over the whole tribe, and a tiger's roar came from the distance. I immediately looked in the direction of the doorway, and to my surprise, the leopard cubs had actually found the honey. Parker wagged his tail like a puppy and waited moodily for my appreciation. I complained in a very breathless whisper, "How am I supposed to eat it when you come back with it in your mouth? That liquid running down is all your saliva." "Right." The leopard was startled by me and hastily dropped the honey in his mouth. He wasn't unhappy, though, and his small eyes quickly spotted my bandaged ankle. His little amber eyes shone with unparalleled joy, and inwardly he was as happy as if food had fallen from heaven. He transformed into his human form and grabbed my arm with large, excited hands. "You've released your mate with the snake beast." Puck flashed his little tiger teeth in anticipation, his tail wagging happily left and right behind him. I didn't answer the comment, but reached out to caress his face. "What happened to your face?" Parker, who was still happy as can be, suddenly stiffened and stopped moving, The fact that he couldn't get rid of it meant that Turnip still liked snake beasts. He ignored the large bag off his face. His mouth gritted in indignation. He casually grabbed a side of honey, the force in his hand suddenly relaxing a little bit. At a loss for words, I opened my mouth to say something, and a plate of honey was thrown into my small hands. I Saturday up on my knees and yelled for Parker, but he just turned around and left the room I was in like he didn't hear me. I held the honey in my hand and shouted, "Wait a minute, you've got a lot of bumps on you. Rub some honey on them. It'll reduce that inflammation," only to see Puck leave without looking back, his little tail all a little lost in a shrug of. He walked out of his room with a sad face, and just happened to run into his mother, who was walking towards him. The two of them bumped into each other for a moment. The beautiful woman was instantly shocked out of her skin, and her small hand holding the cotton tightened slightly, completely unaware of what was happening. Little Parker didn't want his mother to see him like this, and frowned nervously as he planned to run away. She shouted loudly for the cubs who had run out. Et, resolutely neglecting what she held in her hand, intended to go forward and make some inquiries. The beautiful woman walked over with a puzzled look on her face after seeing her son stop. "What the hell happened to you guys?" Puck couldn't ignore the loss that had arisen because of me, his little ears shrugging as he dared not look up. Turnip likes that snake beast.